Futures trading involves risk and is not suitable for all investors. Content provided in this segment is meant for educational purposes and is not a solicitation to buy or sell commodities.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Grain Feed. I am your host, Jake Kinglsey. Maybe this time we've kicked Jim out for good. We'll find out next week. Joining me today from Fresno, California, I bet it's a little warmer out there than it is here in Kansas, Natalie McCarty, who alongside me advises our dairy and livestock producers on their cash feed purchasing. How are you this morning, Natalie?
Great.
I guess it's actually the afternoon. Been a long day here. Just returned from the NGFA Country Elevator Conference in Kansas City. Got a little bit of insight into what operators across the grain industry are seeing as they deal with a big crop and storing that going into the winter months, how they feel about what they've got on the ground, what their plans are maybe for moving some of that going into 2025. So maybe some good feedback there, some things to think about certainly as we manage risk for our folks here. Before we get too far into this, I'll go ahead and have Lexi timestamp the broadcast. It is shortly after 3:30 on Thursday, December 12th. Corn markets closed down today about 4.5 cents, with March 25 futures finishing at 443.5. Soybeans finished a little bit mixed. You could probably call it unchanged, with the March contract trading up half a penny, finishing at 10.03 1/4. And then soybean meal, I don't know how stubborn it is. It's been playing along pretty nicely here the last couple of months, really, with the March futures closing down $1.40 at $296.70. All right. So, Natalie, we've had a little bit of activity here in the market this week. Couple things going on and some good opportunity to manage some risk and get some feed bought. I think first things first, we had a little bit of a surprise in the December WASDE released on Tuesday. Why don't you talk us through a little bit of that and what we might be needing to do about some of those changes?
Absolutely. I think the biggest change in the market and in that report was that the USDA lowered the corn ending stock here in the United States. They took it from 1.938 in November down to 1.738. The market was kind of expecting some of those changes. I don't think they expected it to happen in one fell swoop and one report. We have seen exports be very robust at this stage of the game, and also ethanol production. So those were the two big changes that they made in the report that allowed them to drop that number by 200.
Like you said, I think we were anticipating it in part, but maybe not quite this early or in this big of a change all at once, like you said. Certainly leaves some questions as we move into that January report. And, I guess we haven't had too much time to digest this thing yet, but it does make me wonder. I spent some time chatting with Verl, no doubt, Prather up there in Kansas City, and his comment continues to be that there's still plenty of room to reduce the corn yield. So something to think about. I don't know just how far they would move that or if they'll move that, but there are plenty of levers still to pull. The USDA puts their report together for January, so there could be more excitement there. I think looks like the market had pretty well accounted for most of this move in futures, as we had a little bit of a run up post report and then kind of a quiet day on Wednesday following. And then, as we saw here today, retracing back lower a little bit, taking some of those gains back off of these future curves. So we will kind of pay attention to that futures market as we move into the last couple of weeks of this year and kick off 2025. But I think you saw some of the first signals of some beneficial market moves for feed buyers in response to this futures rally and something we've been waiting for there. What are you seeing on basis and the cash markets out in your part of the world?
One of the things that we talk with a lot of our folks about all the time is when we see board run up, a lot of times basis will move the opposite direction. And that's why we recommend sometimes booking the two separately. And that's exactly what we've seen. Boards run up, Basis has come down. Really net effect on the cash price is about zero, roughly. I think right now that provides an opportunity to maybe go in and lock in that basis level and then work the futures targets behind it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we've seen in more place than one, at least the January, February, March basis, if not the whole stretch out into September, come down, particularly that January through March window coming down to the tune of 10 or even 15 cents, maybe even a little bit more than that in certain markets. I think we had been preaching some patience and working, may have felt like a little bit of aggressive bids in the Western rail dependent markets. And I think over the course of this last week and really the last couple of days, you can check the box in Idaho, California, Arizona, Texas. They all saw a reduction and are within arm's reach of our goals and the bids we've had out there. So starting to make the rounds with a few of my folks to step in and get something done there. I think you've been doing a good bit of that as well the last couple of days. Do you have thoughts? Do you feel like there's more room to work lower yet, or is this time to step in and get a significant chunk cleaned up?
On the corn side, I think it is. And it seems like these aggressive basis levels are trending all the way out through September. Take one piece of the risk off the table on the basis side by getting it booked and then work the futures is my recommendation.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that and start working through that. I know California looked like maybe they led a little bit of that wave. We'll take a peek at some of these other states as we work through the next couple of days and see if we can get something similar going there. I think I agree with you. Some of the conversations that I had, again, like I said, with a lot of these operators at these Midwestern grain facilities this week, was asking them kind of questions around their harvest and this sort of unusually high volume of ground piles that they put out this year, or that we've at least heard of. And some of the comments were that, they were expecting a big crop, and maybe this is more so in the Western grain belt than the overall space there, but they were expecting a big crop and it came in a little bit bigger than they were anticipating. And so some of these folks went out and kind of put up more ground piles than they were planning to. They're going to have to work pretty hard to keep some of this stuff in good condition and get it out in a timely manner to keep from losing too much of that product to shrink and spoilage being on the ground. I think these are some of the most capable people of doing that, but it is going to be a challenge. And so taking advantage of this break in basis is probably a pretty good idea to avoid any kind of a spook in the market should they start to maybe get into a bind with logistics and getting some of this stuff out in a timely manner. And then you can turn back around and start to work the futures. Like we said, it kind of turned back around on the futures here today. If we continue to trend lower there's going to be some opportunities, work some bid to get your futures set against those basis contracts. So while we're talking basis here, we've been monitoring the protein markets. We've seen some pretty attractive basis numbers here for quite a while. We've seen very nice futures values for protein buyers. Are you seeing any change on the protein basis side of things and any change in our call to action on that?
On proteins, yes. Crush continues to be record. Actually, the October report came out, and again, it was another record. Lots of soybean meal being made, lots of canola meal being made, and that has put pressure on the markets. As far as canola, I think it does bear a little bit of watching because we have President Trump indicating when he steps into office, his very first thing he is going to do is going to be to put a 25% tariff on Canada and also on Mexico to curb, people coming across the border and drugs coming across the border. Again, where does our canola meal come from? Comes from Canada. So it's a potential real increase in price for Canada on the canola meal.
Yeah, I think we've been talking about that a little bit, and I think the market is starting to be rightfully concerned with that. Who knows? There could be an about face on that rhetoric when folks start to actually take their seats, but it is certainly something to be concerned with. And we've been focusing on the canola side of it, but I think at the end of the day, these are all interwoven. And so if canola goes, so goes soybean meal to a certain degree. So you got to manage that. And really, the basis values have been within $5 or $10 a ton of our targets and what we would have called normal purchasing windows, if not within those windows at this point. And the futures, like I said, are at or very close to $300 a ton. That's a nice cash price to be owning. So stepping in and getting some of that done. And I think we've had folks looking even at some new crop stuff. I don't know that you can get some cash feed purchased out there for next October forward, but certainly some opportunity to manage the futures risk out there pretty cost effectively if you're interested in getting started on something there. Just the first layer, not a huge swipe at that. So a couple things we've been looking at this week. Any other points of interest we ought to dive into here?
No, I think those are kind of the big targets at this moment.
Plenty of things to do and a lot to check off of our list. We've been waiting on some of this for quite a while, so we're glad to finally have it here. I guess we'll get back to it and get on the phones with folks to start getting some feedback. Thank you for being on here, Natalie. That will do it for this week's edition of the Grain Feed. Thank you to Paige and Lexi for your production magic. Thank you to Corey for her help in putting this all together. And thank you to the viewers. We will see you next week on the Grain Feed.